Hey soccer fans, welcome back to the Feed the Fire podcast. I am your host Nick, and I hope everyone has enjoyed MLS Cup LA Galaxy Red Bull New York and is sufficiently prepared for a very, very busy offseason that is already underway. Before we dive into the MLS Cup recap, before we dive into some new Chicago Fire news and signings, I just want to recognize and let everyone know December 6th was the feast day of St. Nicholas, the saint I am named after, so I hope that all the Nicks, Nicholas, Nikki, Nicolette, everyone out there who celebrates and remembers the feast day of St. Nicholas had a wonderful and blessed day. And it is a Greek tradition that on your name day, on your saint's day, you take everyone out and treat everyone for a meal. So Friday, cut out work just a little early. My wife gets home. The kids got home from school. Straight A's on the report cards. I said, what better way than to celebrate the feast day and good work at school, and we all just went out for a nice dinner. Wife and I had a couple cocktails. It was a very good evening. So hope everyone had a great weekend, and we are ramped up and ready to go for the week. A couple of reminders, if you want to reach out to me, you can email me glasshousesoccer@gmail.com or follow me along on social media at glasshousesoccer. I want to thank everyone who has subscribed on YouTube. Last week we eclipsed 100 subscribers, so please continue to share the link, share the show, and let's continue to grow the conversation around Major League Soccer and the Chicago Fire. What's definitely helped grow the YouTube channel a little bit are the daily shorts that I have been putting out every morning, a little 45 to 60 second clip on just the topic of the day or some news from the prior evening, what's going on with the Fire, MLS, USMNT, world soccer in general. So make sure you're subscribing on YouTube, turning on the notifications so you can tune into the little shorts that I do each morning, each weekday, and most of the time they will lead into topics on the podcast. And speaking of topics on the podcast, we are of course talking about the LA Galaxy's record 6th MLS Cup Championship, defeating Red Bulls 2-1 this past Saturday. Oddly enough, all 3 goals were scored in the first 30 minutes. And if you listen to some of my preview shows, you know that I was saying these two teams are not going to come out timid and trying to feel each other out, not wanting to be the one to make the first mistake. That these two teams are going to play their attacking style if you're the Galaxy, and your pressing, turnover, immediately counterattack style if you're the Red Bulls. And it gave us 3 goals in the first half hour. Definitely not the opening that the Red Bulls would have liked. They came out very, very flat. Now, one of their players, and the name is blanking on me, ended up getting sick during warm-ups and was scratched from the lineup. So you saw them have to shuffle around their starting lineup just a little bit, and maybe that kind of made the team feel a little bit uneasy, or maybe they just were flat. I think it's the latter. A team like the Red Bulls, who have a system, who, as people say, the team is the star, the system is what's out there playing and making plays. When you're a team like that, a late scratch shouldn't bother you as much as it did the Red Bulls in this game. They came out very flat and allowed LA, even without Riqui Puig, despite Gaston Brugman having MLS Cup MVP performance, they allowed the Galaxy to run right at them. Gave up 2 goals, but then they get a corner kick, in the 26th minute, I want to say. I'm pulling this from memory here, and I'm sitting watching the game with my son, and I go, son, this is how teams get back into games when they go down early. Set pieces. Sure enough, as a result of the set piece, Red Bulls get their equalizing goal, and not their equalizing goal, get on the scoreboard. From that point on, throughout the rest of the first half, they controlled the match. They controlled the last 15, 20 minutes of the first half, but unfortunately, they couldn't convert, couldn't equalize, and then in the second half, it was a very back and forth affair, with both teams getting some quality chances. Probably none better than an Emil Forsberg kind of sitter from the top of the box. He just couldn't find that far post to the inside of the far post. It actually hit the outside of the post and cleared wide. But if he just had a little bit more of a bend on it, it could have been a completely different game. But he didn't, and it wasn't, and the Galaxy end up with the victory. I think part of what kind of threw off the Red Bulls is that they ended up with about 56% possession in this match. And as we know, they're not a team that likes to play with possession. And the Galaxy, as much as they liked playing with possession, they were able to get those goals early and then really pick and choose when they pushed forward, making the Red Bulls try to actually break them down a little bit in certain parts of the game. So it ended up Red Bulls 56% possession, Galaxy 44. Both teams ended up with 12 shots, and LA with 6 on goal, Red Bulls with 5 on goal. The defense played well for both teams. Red Bulls blocked 4 shots, LA won. Not a really solid, strong passing game from the Galaxy. Only 399 total passes at 75% accuracy. Red Bulls fared much better. 554 passes, about 82% accuracy. But again, not a lot of those in dangerous areas in front of the box. 6 corners to 4 in favor of the Red Bulls. 6 crosses to 1 in favor of the Red Bulls. Both 2 offsides for the Galaxy, 1 for the Red Bulls. XG here. Galaxy 1.3 expected goals to Red Bulls 1. Each goalkeeper credited with 4 saves, 2 yellows for the Red Bulls, 1 for the Galaxy. Maybe there could have been another earlier yellow card for the Red Bulls, but the referee did a very good job not wanting cards to dictate the game, but rather the actual play. I think this was a pretty well officiated game as well. Let me know if you think otherwise. I don't know if obviously Red Bull fans are going to be a little biased against it, but they may have had a shout for a penalty, for a couple different penalties. There was one, I think it was Lewis Morgan that maybe got stepped on in the box, but I think it was a little maybe too soft to give, especially considering how the play had been going of the match. But there was another one off of, I want to say it was a corner kick, where you saw a Galaxy defender just tackle a Red Bull player. Now, maybe the referee didn't want to give it because it was so far off the ball, or maybe he should have. We'll never really know. I don't know if the Referees Association is going to put out anything about it. But there were a couple shouts for penalties there for the Red Bulls. But other than those kind of maybe not kind of calls that the referee, can justify it both ways, I think it was a pretty well officiated game. And again, it was LA with a slight edge in XG, but all that matters is the actual goals that were scored. So congrats to the Galaxy for getting number 6 more than any other club. What I posed on my YouTube short this morning was the question, is this the start of a new Galaxy dynasty? What does this season and this MLS Cup mean for the Galaxy? And we're going to see how it affects the Chicago Fire in a second. But what does it mean for the Galaxy? Can they build on this? Can they sustain this? Can they win trophies over the next 2, 3, 4 seasons, whether it be Supporter Shields, MLS Cup, Champions Cup, Leagues Cup, U.S. Open Cup, whatever it may be? Can they continue on this path? Now, they've got the players, obviously. That does assume Riqui Puig gets back to 100% from his ACL tear, which some players do. Some players come back just as strong, if not stronger, because they've been focusing so much more on rehabilitating, rebuilding the muscle, and just working out. You know how great of a touch and a technical ability he already has, so he might come back stronger. Other players will end up losing that half step and really affect their game and really affect their peak level of performance. So to be determined on how Riqui Puig comes back, but if he comes back at 100%, we know that the Galaxy have the players to be competing for trophies. They've got the coach. Greg Vanney is a winning coach. He won a title with Toronto, had some great players there, helped build that team. He's been winning with the Galaxy, so at least winning this season. Last season, we know they came in 13th, and that's a good sign. Jump ahead to the Fire impact a little bit. That's a good sign for the Fire. You can turn it around in a season and not just become a better team and make the playoffs, but actually win a trophy. So they've got a good coach. They've got the support of ownership. They've got the support of the fans. So everything seems to be there. If they can stay healthy, maybe add a little depth in the midfield and center back, especially knowing they're going to be playing in Champions Cup, if they can add that depth, stay healthy, they have the potential for more trophies next year and for building a dynastic team, I will call it. However, here's the flip side, because there's always 2 sides to this coin. Gabriel Peck, MLS Newcomer of the Year, star for the Galaxy, is already being rumored to have some interest from Arsenal and Liverpool. And we've seen that teams with sustained success, and I'm kind of looking at the LAFC model here, they're always, top 3 or 4 of the Western Conference. what they do is they keep their star players for a year or two, sell them off for a big transfer fee, and then reinvest. And you have to have great scouting to do that. So will the Galaxy follow that model? I mean, will they even move Peck? He's only been here a year, right? Is his transfer value so high that they can't say no to a deal coming from Liverpool? Do they not want to stifle of the player's dream of playing in the Premier League, assuming that is where he wants to go? So these are things they've got to think about that could derail this dynastic LA Galaxy, mid-2020s kind of a team here. Also, is there interest in Joveljic from other clubs in Europe? I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's scouting reports being poured over right now after his goal and his performance in this MLS Cup and this LA Galaxy season as well as last. So are they going to, again, get an offer that they can't refuse? Are they going to want to move on from Peck and Joveljic and see if there's other interest or other players that they can bring in so that they don't miss a beat? That's going to be hard turning down money in MLS. Also, they are without their director of scouting who signed all these players, who brought all these guys in. Mikey Stevens has now moved on with the Chicago Fire of all clubs. Call it, he accomplished what he wanted to with the Galaxy, maybe. Call it a little bit of nostalgia for going back to one of the teams he played for. He did play for the Galaxy as well. Maybe it's the connection with Berhalter and that he's going to be given a much bigger role and responsibility or bigger salary with the new restructured sporting side of the Chicago Fire organization. But the guy who built this Galaxy team from the scouting perspective is now with the Chicago Fire. So again, that bodes really well for the Chicago Fire, how they're going to be able to look at this LA Galaxy model, how they were able to win, and they literally have the guy that figured it out. The only question for the Chicago Fire, though, is that going to work in the Eastern Conference when you've got Columbus and Cincinnati and Miami and Nashville and, by the way, the Red Bulls team who was just in the MLS Cup final? Is it going to work against all those clubs? They're also going to have to be improving faster, improving more, improving on their improvements, getting better in ways that continues to keep the distance with these clubs. So the Fire have to catch up to a lot of these clubs. And then if they're going to want to be beating them, they have to continually improve beyond that to stay ahead of them. So it's a tall order for Berhalter, Stevens, and co. right now. So that's another little bit of the tie-in. Are they going to try and build this club in the same way with these just dangerous wingers, with an assassin as a center striker, and that key midfielder like a Riqui Puig? Could Brian Gutierrez be that guy? I don't know. Maybe. We've never seen a coach that has given him the go-ahead to do that and run the club like Riqui runs the Galaxy. So we will see. The other thing, if you want to look at some of the obstacles to the Galaxy becoming a dynasty, Greg Vanney wasn't able to repeat his MLS Cup trophy with TFC. And as we know, those epic series with Seattle in the finals, right? Seattle winning 2 of 3 finals against TFC in 4 years, I think. So he was never able to repeat as MLS Cup champions with Toronto. So can he do it with the Galaxy? Also, they're going to need a lot more depth. They're going to need a lot more help if they want to make a run through the CONCACAF Champions Cup. We know how that tournament at the beginning of an MLS season affects teams throughout the course of MLS. And there's no kind of summer to recover with Leagues Cup being there. And then we've heard from Garber too that every club is going to participate in some tournament this season, whether it's US Open Cup, Leagues Cup, or CONCACAF Champions Cup. They just don't know how it's going to work out. And we'll talk about Garber's comments in a little bit as well. So all in all, the season established the blueprint for the Galaxy to continue their winning ways. But there's a lot of obstacles that they have this offseason that could prevent them from becoming a repeat MLS Cup champion or multiple trophies in the near future. Now, if you do want to keep up on what the Galaxy are doing, keep an eye on all their offseason moves, I suggest you go follow News Across the Galaxy, an LA Galaxy YouTube channel and podcast. There is a pal of mine, Edgar, who works on that show, helps produce, host. He even sent me a video, like him and his buddies were just in tears after the Galaxy won it. So go follow along with News Across the Galaxy. on YouTube, on all social media platforms, and then go give Edgar a follow on Twitter at Edgar NAGS. Assuming you all are still on Twitter if you haven't moved to some other platform at this point. But that's what I want to say about the Galaxy. MLS Cup, there's a lot that the Chicago Fire can learn from. Again, you can turn your season around. You need to build on the attack. You have to have competent goalkeeping and defense, but you need to have offense. Like, that is what carried the Galaxy through this second half of the season and through the playoffs. It wasn't, winning games 1-0. I don't think that exists in this league for sustained runs. You're not going to win 4 games in a row 1-0. Hey, and I'm sure someone's going to go and look at some teams' records now and say, oh, this team won 4 games in a row, 1-0, and see, blah, blah, blah. But the point I'm trying to make is you can't sustain excellence in MLS based purely on your defense. There's got to be some offensive firepower there. And I really think that's where the Chicago Fire are going to go. And we're going to talk about that in the second half of the show with one of their new striker signings. But I did want to quickly remind you all of some quotes from Don Garber, the commissioner, that he shared in his State of the League address. There's a few that I wanted to pick out here that I think are kind of the most pertinent, the most interesting. Garber says that MLS will take off for the 2026 World Cup, as well as a portion of the 2025 Club World Cup and 2025 CONCACAF Gold Cup. So you see this in 2 ways. Number one, it is the focus is going to be on these international tournaments, World Cup, Gold Cup, Club World Cup. And with the United States hosting all of these, that is going to allow fans, casual fans, regular fans, to kind of level up in their fandom. Casual fans are going to become regulars. Regulars are going to become season ticket members and diehards. Or you're going to get more people coming to random games, more businesses buying in, all that sort of thing. So that's the first thing, that the league is like, let's pause and let's let everyone focus in on these global events here. And we're going to bring that money in internationally as well as domestically. So that's the business side of it. The other thing that people are speculating is that Major League Soccer is going to use these breaks for these 3 tournaments that I just mentioned in order to shift the calendar to the more, traditional, to the more European-based fall-winter-spring calendar rather than spring-summer-fall calendar that we're currently on. And that'll put the MLS schedule in line with the majority of the other leagues around the world. And by kind of staggering out some of these breaks, they'll be able to do that. Now, that's still, as Garber said in other, as he continued on in his speech or in other press conferences, like, those are just talks. Like, there's nothing serious going on right now, but everything's got to start with a conversation. So they're having these conversations to see if they're going to stretch it out. Personally, I'm kind of against it, but maybe I'm just an old fogey like that, where just keep it the way it is, right? However, I will say, if they switched to the fall-winter-spring calendar, the biggest obstacle to that is the weather, and the next biggest obstacle is NFL, NBA, NHL schedules. But honestly, I barely watch the NBA. I don't watch a lot of NFL because you got to have so many different streaming services. And I've just never been able to sit down and watch a hockey game from start to finish. And I'm not knocking any of these sports. That's just me as a sports fan. Now, part of it is because I'm in the Chicago market, and the Blackhawks are bad again, the Bears suck, and the Bulls are terrible. So it's not like I'm not the good market study here. Like, why don't you go find some guys from LA, or maybe some of the Canadian population, if you want to look at the hockey numbers there, and how does MLS compare to hockey, and who's going to watch it. But everything that I've seen is, at least in Canada, hockey is still number one by a long shot. So it's going to be really difficult to compete for eyeballs. But again, are the same people watching hockey and the Vancouver Whitecaps and CF Montreal and TFC? I don't know. So that's one thing that maybe MLS, with their subscription numbers and with their which we don't know yet, and kind of with their desire to grow the game globally and get more global eyeballs, maybe they feel like, hey, we could make this calendar switch and probably increase our global viewership and maybe pick up a few more American viewers who are, tuned into sports during those seasons. You never know. And then, hey, we'll get that MLS Christmas game, won't we? Let's see, what else did Garber say? I already kind of talked about these schedule changes. To quote him, he said, "Making those changes is something we have to be very thoughtful about. I do think we are considering more than ever before the opportunity to change, but it's not something we're ready to talk about now." I think by talk about now, he means to the press, to the public, not so much internally. Now, he did say regarding Leagues Cup, Champions Cup, and the U.S. Open Cup, quote, "We will participate in the U.S. Open Cup next year. We will likely have more teams. Tournament play, if we can manage it with 30 teams, with at least one team in each tournament, is good for the club and good for the fans," end quote. So this is really interesting. So instead of having a franchise have to manage the difficulties of playing in 2 or 3 tournaments on top of the season, well, the league's going to manage it for you. Now, that's interesting. I think that kind of makes a divide between the club ownership, players, management, coaching, and the league. Because if they come up with some set criteria, well, you're forced into a tournament maybe you didn't want to participate in or would have rather participated in something else, or it still doesn't solve the idea of schedule congestion if every team is going to end up participating in at least one additional tournament, if not 2. And then what does that do? Maybe the numbers weren't good for MLS Next Pro this year. So there still are a lot of questions, and I'm going to reserve judgment here. I'm going to play lawyer. Let me reserve my rights to pass judgment on this topic whenever they actually come up with a system. Obviously, CONCACAF Champions Cup, those criteria for qualifying are set, though they have changed with the expansion of the tournament. And we know FIFA sometimes just gives out at-large bids. See Inter Miami going to the Club World Cup this year, or in 2025. So those things are set, but probably still subject to change. It'll be interesting to see if they take the top finishing teams from the last season and those move into the Leagues Cup, and then kind of the bottom finishing teams move into U.S. Open Cup, or however they're going to do it. But I am happy to see that they are going to be participating in the U.S. Open Cup, but we still don't know all these different criteria here. All right, we need to take a halftime water break, so make sure you go out to your local 7-Eleven, get yourself a bottle of Skira, and absolutely stay hydrated as the holidays are coming up. Let me take a deep breath, because we still have a lot of Chicago Fire news to talk here. And the first one we're going to talk about is that speculated and now confirmed signing of a new striker for the first team, but a familiar face. According to Manuel Veth, David Poreba has signed a first-team contract with the Chicago Fire. As you may know, Poreba had 18 goals and 2 assists with CF2 last season in MLS Next Pro and won the Golden Boot and MLS Next Pro MVP awards. Now, before we really dive into this, what I wanted to point out, now it's a little changed since his initial reporting has been confirmed. Manuel Veth, if you look him up, like his online profile says he's a regional manager for Transfer Market US. And I have seen him put some rumors out there that he believes to be true or wants you to believe to be true. I've seen him make some comments. I've not considered him a trustworthy source. And to be perfectly honest, I think I may have muted him on Twitter, so I wasn't seeing his stuff. I don't know. But in this case, the sources later confirmed to Joe Chats over at OnTap Sportsnet that this is accurate and that Poreba has actually signed a first-team deal with the Chicago Fire. We'll see if we can get those details in the coming days. But here is a little bit of history about David Poreba. If you don't know him or haven't gotten out to see any of the CF2 matches this past season, he's 22 years old. He joined Fire 2 on loan from Stal Mielec in Poland ahead of the 2024 season. He spent the 2023 season with MLS Next Pro with Crown Legacy, Charlotte FC's club. So this is his first year in the Chicago Fire, I'll call it pro organization, though he, if I recall, he had been with the academy a little bit. He's originally from Lake Zurich, Illinois, and wanted to be closer to home after spending time overseas and spending time away from his family here. So the one question that we still have to get answered is he going to Are we going to have to pay a transfer fee for him because he was on loan from Stal Mielek, or did his loan end and now he's a free agent, whatever the case may be. But we're going to hopefully get those details over the next couple days. But big picture, this does kind of tie into those rumors we talked about that Koutsias was going to head to FC Lugano. The way I look at it, the Fire have got their star striker in Hugo Kuipers. They've got their development guy now in David Poreba, and Koutsias was the development guy, so he's got to move out. Now, they still need that second reliable scoring threat, that second striker, or that attacking midfielder who's going to be the number 2 goal-scoring option, and then maybe that late-game guy off the bench. That late-game guy off the bench, I think it's still going to be Tom Barlow, just because he's under contract. Not that I'm a huge fan of his play on the pitch, but that's why I think this ties in and kind of will substantiate some of those rumors to Koutsias moving, because Poreba is now the development project, and Koutsias is not going to be that second goal scoring option, 10 to 12 goals this season to Kuipers 20 goals or something like that, right? Let's see, what other notes do we have on this one? Also, it really does kind of fit in with Berhalter, overhauling the roster a little bit, freeing up some cap space. I think Poreba is considered a domestic player. I don't know if he's going to be considered a homegrown player. Those are some of those great MLS roster rules. We have to see how it all shakes out once we get some more details on his contract. But it would be a very smart move if now Poreba is a domestic player, frees up that international roster spot, and they'll be able to go out and sign some other big players. Speaking of CF2, they do have a new head coach. Mike Matkovic is now the new CF2 head coach. He has 30 years of experience at various levels in the United States. He served as the Chicago Fire's head domestic scout for the past 2 seasons and is now the second full-time head coach for CF2. Greg Berhalter says, "We're excited to have Mike transition into his new role as head coach of Chicago Fire FC2. With his extensive experience and deep connection to the Chicago soccer community, Mike is the ideal fit for this role. Mike's leadership in developing our young talent will be important as we work to establish a clear identity and unified style of play across the first team, Fire 2, and Academy." End quote. And that's something that I've been calling for. That's something that I've been talking about on this show a long time, is an identity throughout the entire Chicago Fire organization. I've compared it to Major League Baseball clubs and teams where they have their kind of style of play, how they want to run the bases, how they want to train their pitchers, how they want to, hit and run in certain situations. They preach the same thing from their single A club through their major club. We see it a little bit with Red Bulls and Philadelphia Union, that they have their styles of play that they preach. And why do those guys have such good academies? Because they have an identity and every player knows their role and what it is at every level of play. So I think that's a very important thing, and I'm happy to hear that that's part of Matkovic's charge from Greg Berhalter. A little more background on the new CF2 coach. Matkovic originally joined the Fire as head coach of the Fire Reserves in 2001, leading them to the PDL Central Conference Championship and finishing second place in 2003. He was an assistant of the first team from 2009 to 2013 before becoming head coach of Des Moines Menace of USL 2. At the MLS level, he was most recently an assistant coach for the Columbus Crew in 2019, having previously served as an assistant coach at the Fire, Chivas USA, and Toronto FC. Ooh, Chivas USA, there's a name right for you, right? And as we know, a lot of guys who passed through Chivas USA went on to pretty good careers in MLS. Now we get to hear from Matkovic. He says, quote, "I'm excited to step into this new role, and I want to thank Greg Berhalter and Alex Bowler for their trust. I look forward to working with our young players and helping develop the next generation of talent here in Chicago." And then the article on the Chicago Fire website just goes into his background. The aforementioned Alex Bowler also has quotes, Alex Bowler being the general manager of CF2. And wow, even his history, they got it going all the way back to 1985. Matkovic began coaching in the Chicagoland area in 1985 and later founded the Chicago Magic Soccer Club in 1989. Oh man, I used to play against those guys when I was a kid playing club soccer in Rockford, and they were really good. So hopefully that definitely filters on up. Through the Magic and the Fire Reserves, Matkovic has developed talents such as Ned Grabavoy, Eric Lehaj, and Brad Guzan. And by the way, I think I put it out in some Twitter post. So Brad Guzan and I were the same age, and he played at the Magic at the same time I was playing for Rock Run Express and playing against the Magic. So I like to think that I got to play against Brad Guzan at some point, and that's probably the closest I'll ever be to a professional career as a player. So that is the new CF2 coach. We could go on. Those are long articles here. Let's see. What else do we have to talk about from the Chicago Fire? Oh, by the way, the front office won an award. Chicago Fire FC was named as the winner of the 2024 Mark Abbott MLS Starting 11 Club Business Award for Business Intelligence Project of the Year. Didn't even know they had that award. But hey, the Fire front office is winning something. They received the award for the club's launch of an SMS subscriber program in partnership with the company Attentive, an industry-leading SMS marketing software. So apparently partnering with an SMS third-party vendor is a brand new thing for MLS clubs because it got the Chicago Fire an award. That is pretty wild. A couple other things to keep an eye on here. The expansion draft is Wednesday, December 11th, so we'll be on the lookout for the Chicago Fire to release their player protection list sometime on Tuesday the 10th. Also, want to conclude with this. I had a great phone call with friend of the show, John Donovan. You remember early on in the season, he was chiming in with his thoughts, giving us 7-8 minutes every episode. John wants to build some excitement within the Chicago Fire fandom and within maybe trickle up to the front office a little bit. So John goes, hey, we need to start some rumors here about the Chicago Fire bringing in some players. So I want to hear from you all. What rumors do you want to start? What players can we make up to start coming to the Chicago Fire here? The one that John thought would be an easy sell would be, let's get Lucho Acosta to the Chicago Fire. How great would it be to have an MVP caliber attacking midfielder linking up with Hugo Kuipers on these beautiful through balls, on these high arcing bending crosses for Kuipers to get his head on. And we know that the situation in Cincinnati isn't what Acosta wants it to be, and I know he probably wants that move to Europe, but you know what? Why doesn't he come to the Chicago Fire for like a 1-year prove-it deal, and then he can really drive his value up and then help the Chicago Fire get back to the playoffs, win a playoff game? That would be great. I think the Fire is a perfect landing spot for Lucho Acosta from Cincinnati. John, how did I do there? Do you think I sold it well enough? You think that rumor is going to start to get legs out in the Chicago Fire community? But also, the Chicago Fire, and again, getting back to following the LA Galaxy's pattern, the Chicago Fire need a high-impact attacking winger. They need someone with pace, like a Paintsill. At least that's what a lot of people are saying, especially after watching how the Galaxy just won MLS Cup. They need a speedy winger. Chris Mueller lost a step after his surgery. They got rid of Ariel Lassiter, who's kind of having a little bit of a step off here. Selassie, is he the guy that's going to be able to do it? I think he likes to get inside too much, get in front of goal too much to be that guy on the wing. So who's it going to be? What rumors can we start out there, Fire fans? Let me know. We'll try and make it happen. And with that, I want to thank you all for tuning in, for listening to Feed the Fire. Again, I'm your host, Nick. Please continue to like, subscribe, rate, review, do everything you can to get a little online currency here, bump up the show in the algorithm. Again, we're available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe on YouTube to get all of my daily thoughts, my YouTube soccer shorts, as I call them. And with that, I'll leave you to your day, and let's go Fire.